My name is Sarah El Male. I'll be moderating, asking questions of these lovely people.
Very kindly offered her services.
I was asked, actually, but I was very happy to do so, really happy to do so. We can go ahead. I'm a voice actor, and I'm best known, I guess, for Gone Home, but then also Call of Duty, so that whole spectrum, everything in between. But my main, probably, credential for this is that I put about 400 hours into Dragon Age Inquisition alone.
Respect.
Yeah. Don't test me on any lore though. It was all crafting. But it's my pleasure to introduce David Gaider and Dan Plunkett, and I'm going to let them explain a little bit about what they are responsible for with regard to building believable fantasy worlds, and what they're looking out for in terms of what they're stewards of in terms of believability.
Yeah. All right. My name is David Gaider. I was the lead writer of the Dragon Age series through Inquisition, which means not Jaws of Hakon or Trespasser. Although Trespasser was a whole deal that we kind of were aiming towards, so I feel like I was kind of involved in that. And I still wrote my characters. Cassandra and Dorian were kind of my babies, and they threatened to have somebody else write them. I was like, no.
Excuse you.
He's like, but you're on another project, an unnamed, unannounced project. And I went to my boss on that project, and I said, you're going to give me time to go and write these characters, right? He said, yes, you can go. All right. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi. I'm Dan Plunkett, senior cinematic designer. I came on just for Dragon Age Inquisition, but got to look after all things cinematic as well as technical as far as cinematics go, and then working with our animators and everything else to bring a lot of the scenes you see into the game.
Yeah, and I want to just clear that we can talk pretty freely about the content of these games. A little spoilers disclaimer.
There are
spoilers abound.
Spoilers everywhere.
There are dragons
cool?
in Dragon Age.
Yeah, they're dragons.
Just a check. Put up your hand if you've played and finished Inquisition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
All right, we're good.
Perfect.
We're good.
Totally safe. Okay.
Spoiler zone.
So my first question is mostly for David, and because what I take away from the universe so much is this really thorough examination of this one novel thing, this one fantasy element, magic, and then taking it seriously and imagining, okay, well, we have this very dangerous, innate, mysterious thing that's given to some people and then not to other people. And what does that power dynamic mean? And you have characters that are on both sides of this thing, and it just seems to be like turning this crystal over and over to really like get to the bottom of what that means to have in the world. Right. Is that something you're checking against? Is that how that came about? And then where did that idea come from for you?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty standard fantasy world, in sort of, and by that I mean a Tolkien-esque fantasy world, because there are different flavors. One day I'd like to see, African fantasy or East Indian fantasy. There are lots of different flavors, but in this case, it's a pseudo European Tolkien-esque fantasy, and that was the intention from the start. It was sort of given to me like, okay, this is the kind of fantasy world we want. Can you make something? And I think a lot of it was born of hate. In terms of James Olin, the lead designer, and I sat down and we were talking about fantasy. And of course, we came directly from Baldur's Gate. I worked on Baldur's Gate 2, and that was my first game, my first job in the industry, and I basically got that job because I sat down with James, and we were longtime D&D fans, and we just sort of chatted about D&D forever. He's like, all right, you know D&D pretty well. Okay, all right, we'll try you out. But when we were talking about this, where we were talking about what we wanted to do, we ended up just having a bunch of conversations about all the things about Dungeons and Dragons that we really hated. And one of them was the fact that the world doesn't seem to have an internal plausibility in terms of how it treated the magic that existed within it. Like the people had magic, but the world didn't react to the fact that people had magic, and they just did, and it was like it didn't even happen. Like I remember, I've said this before. This like if you knew that every first level magic user had charm person, unless you had a detailed knowledge, like but it only lasts for 10 minutes. No, most people wouldn't have that. So if you knew that this was a thing, and you met somebody you knew who was a magic user, and you thought they were pretty cool and you liked them, wouldn't you stop and think, do I like them because I like them, or do I like them because they cast a spell on me? And if everybody could do that, like, how would you trust mages? That's where that conversation about the circle of magi came about, like a desire for a type of internal plausibility where the world recognizes what the various people are capable of and how real people would react. So it was an idea of sort of having a, take your typical fantasy realm and say, well, if the things that are in that typical realm were put in our world, how would people respond? And I think that's where that thought came from.
Yeah, I think both of you are in different ways dealing with physics, where you're like, we have this novel element and we have people physics, how people respond to each other in a way that feels authentic and familiar. And then you're dealing with like, well, we have dragons now. What is a real physics for dragons? Like, what does that mean for environmental physics?
And you want to make that dragon feel weighted. You want to make them feel believable in a way that it works with that world. And the way you can drive a lot of that, there's a couple of different things. Like for the dragon, the way its performance is driven, it's through its physicality. Its physicality, if you watch, it's very much like a cat. And that was on purpose, because he's got this shoulders that will move up and down, and he will step forward, especially in Adamant, when you see him hop down from the top of the ramparts down to go. He looks far more like a cat jumping in, but that provides you kind of a hook to understand, like, okay, that's how he moves. I've seen something like similar to that, I can understand that. And then there's also how characters respond to that. It's their reaction to it, because a person that lives in a world where there are dragons, they're either going to see the dragon in the distance and go, oh my god, or like Iron Bull, like, oh yeah, let's do this.
It's like a massive boner when you see a dragon.
As opposed to
animate that.
Yeah. I have this thing for you. Please bring this back to me tomorrow.
But I mean, as opposed to one of us actually seeing a dragon where it'd be like, pant-shittingly, oh my god, like, I've never seen anything like that. It'd be a far different response if we saw that in the real world, and that's how you can kind of hook it in. So I'm seeing these characters that I can feel related to, and that's how they respond to this, so that's how I can get my hook into this world.
Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that seems like it just gives the Cinematics guys a lot of reasons to watch cat videos.
All the time. Every Thursday, all Thursday.
So talking now about having different teams involved in this maintaining a coherent world across a team of, I think you said 150 people just on Dragon Age?
At its height, yeah.
At its height. That seems like a neat trick. So do you have one meeting, several meetings where you sit like this face to face, or do you have sort of an email pipeline? Like, how do you maintain consistency? That's probably a big question.
Did we?
I think so.
It's a blur. No.
I think so.
There's plenty off the bat, but I mean, it's like you're kind of locking down what the tenets of the narrative are, or at least what the intentions of the narrative is, and then writers will go talk with.
Talk to the microphone.
Can people hear me now like this? That's better, like that.
Yeah.
Okay. You'll get it from the writers, and then writers can talk to Cinematics or anybody else who's in charge of narrative design for the game. You'll have the meetings at the start, but you kind of want to maintain connection throughout the game. Otherwise, you get breaks in what that intention for the narrative is. Sometimes that's a lot that looks more easier to do on paper than not, but...
Yeah, it is a lot of meetings. I think from the narrative side, we started a little bit early.
Yes.
In that when we were doing the concepting for the game, I think some people have an impression that the writers we can. It's called siloing. If we go in, we go off by ourselves, and we live in our little bubble, and we make the story, and then we come out like the story is done. There you go. When I early on at BioWare, the writers sort of did that, and then we discovered slowly that people kind of resented that a little bit, because everybody who came to BioWare kind of did that because they were storytellers, whether they were an artist or even a programmer. Well, not the programmers. But
Shade.
They type words. They type words in code. No.
We're lucky if we can get them to comment their code. But we found that they resented a little bit that we were the only keepers of the story, and they didn't have a lot of input. And everything we do determines what they're going to be working on for the next 2-3 years, right? So as time went on, best practices sort of dictated that as we started our concept work, we'd start early, sort of gathering consensus from the rest of the team. We're going to like the cinematics people and saying, hey, we're about to start work. Is there anything that you'd like to do? And they're like, well, I'd like that scene where like a guy's hanging off a cliff. Okay. Or going to the artist and saying, is there anything like that you'd like to try, like a type of level? And they're like, oh, well, we're thinking, we were talking yesterday about having a really cool swamp. And I'm like, okay, we start collecting these ideas so people feel like they have some participation in the process, even though ultimately the actual plot will come from us.
And that's really the only way to facilitate good buy-in from any of the characters, because if you just start marching forward from your silo and not getting any feedback from anybody, it'd be like 6 months later, like, wait, that's what you're doing with the plot? But I wanted to do this. I want my good old cliffhangy.
Yeah.
No.
And then as time goes on, we're breaking up into groups. We call them pods.
Yes.
Where it's like, okay, the Halam Sharal ball, for instance, that would be cut off as a separate segment, and there would be a writer, a cinematics person, maybe 2 level designers, two level artists, kind of responsible for coming up with that. And then once they would work on it, and then when they got their concept for that plot down, they would present that to the rest of the team. And then the trick just becomes, because each person has their individual part of the plot, the connective tissue between the plots, which actually for Inquisition was probably the most challenging part, just because the connective tissue was sort of integral to the open world, meant that the connective tissue could be like, 10 minutes, could be an hour. If the Hinterlands was involved, maybe 30 hours.
Yeah. Get out of the Hinterlands early, y'all. That is like the main thing I tell people to do who like start Inquisition.
And the other thing you want to have outside of that is when the directive and the idea comes to a different department. So it's verklempt. So the idea for Halam Sharal comes to cinematics, and you're definitely going to have ownership. You're going to have a person who, I am doing most of the scenes for this, just like you'll have a person who does ownership for a follower or anything else. But it's impossible for that one person to do everything that has to do with that, because when you're populating Halam Sharal, we're going to have our dialogue trees, which is done by Cine Design, and then we're going to have our ambient performances of people throughout Halam Sharal while I'm running and investigating, that are talking and dancing and doing whatever else that I can't really interact with, but they color up the world. And that needs to be in charge from somebody else from Cine Design, and then handed over for the more important scenes with, the Empress in the end. Spoilers, we're past spoilers?
Yeah, good, go for it.
Empress lives, Empress dies.
10 a.m.
The more intense scenes goes over to Cineanum. But you always have at least one person who's...
Cinematic animation
Yes,
are the
correct.
people that do the really complicated
Yes.
cutscenes?
Yes. The Adamant Fortress siege and everything. But so for when the Empress assassination comes up, spoilers, that's done by them. But you always do have a through line of one owner who can kind of check back on all of that. So on all the reviews coming up and working on the scenes, can go like, hey, why is that character performing like that? We don't normally have the Empress, doing her crazy hermit dance all the time. Why are you just doing it in that one scene?
So
The writers do that as well, but like with the main characters. We'll have one person who's in charge, but they can't possibly write everything that character says. So like, I would have a scene where Sarah pipes up, and she was the most difficult character to write because Luke Christensen is crazy.
Skittles and tequila? Was that her supposed to be her tone?
Well, that's when we decided what their food and drink was.
Okay.
Yes, hers was Skittles with tequila.
Can we do that really quick? Just a quick menu, a short menu for each character?
If I can recall.
If you can.
Sarah was Skittles and tequila. Blackwell was a hearty brisket. I don't remember what Dorian was, but it was really
Probably
fruity.
everything.
I don't remember.
Oh my God. But ownership, right, there's this that sounds like it strikes a balance between everyone involved having ownership, which seems like it's really important for energy, for creativity, but then also having someone who's in charge who can be like, to save time and to just be clear, I'm going to call it
Yeah,
now.
I would write something for Sarah in that scene, and I go to Luke and say, I think I got her this time, and he'd look at it and be like, no. But yeah, the sort of being in charge of the voice. Whereas from my perspective, then my larger role would be that connective tissue kind of thing. I'm sort of keeping the bigger picture. Hey, writer, you're writing the player character very differently from how this writer's writing the player character, telling them, and I do it in a way of more trying to get across to them what the tone and feel we're going for is, because I can't, when it comes to writing, it's a little bit more vague. You can't break it down to brass tacks. When you see something being done wrong, you can point it out, but it's hard to do that in advance. So generally it's like, okay, I need this. We could take ourselves a little less seriously, but I want, for this part of the plot, I need a feeling that leaves the player sort of feeling like they're in awe, or like the feeling direction and the themes for the middle part, like after the fall of Haven, when they're marching through the mountains and leading up to the song. That was the most difficult process, trying to get everybody crowd together for the feeling we needed when the song was sung, so that maybe, I'm sure not everybody felt the same about it, but we wanted that feeling, like the sort of desperate hope. And if the player was right there when that song was sung, that we thought that could be a powerful moment.
Part of me wishes we could all just sing that shit right now. That would be a moment.
I remember Richard, who was in charge of Josephine's scenes for most of Inquisition. When I went on to Trespasser, I went to go take over Josephine from him. And sometimes you'll get things just so simple as a direction. You'll be like, hey, yeah, so I'm taking over Josephine. If you have any thoughts, have any feelings, or anything you want me to carry over for her, and he just goes, just keep her cute as fuck, okay? I'm like, okay.
Oh, mission accomplished. Oh my God, that's so good. So actually, yeah. So coming in later in the process or on the project or the world, this game, because there's no kind of standardized practice of here's how you make games or here's how you make RPGs even, right? So is there anything that in terms of process that you brought from other jobs you'd been at, or is there anything that you set up in this? I mean, it sounds like you're describing the pipeline pretty clearly, actually, for good reasons. But is there anything like that you just as a way of adjust or talk about adjusting to a new company when it's like all bets are off? What is my job even kind of thing?
Yes, there's always the transitional period. I started out with going out from game school, it was like to mobile games, and then from mobile games I went to working on the ill-fated Command and Conquer, and then after that it went over to BioWare. So from those three different studios, there are definitely some very similar through lines, but like on mobile, you wear very many hats because you're working with 14 other people, and you're like, we need somebody to do effects. Well, I'm kind of working on code scripts right now, but okay, I'll do effects too. Oh, okay, you also want storyboards. Okay, we'll get that too. And then you get to a larger studio where it's more specialized, it's more focused. And then you kind of learn that you can't just jump on something because we need it done. You're like, no, there's somebody there.
It's a gun guy.
Yeah, exactly. We'll go take it to the gun guy. He'll model the guns for us. And then the thing I've liked with BioWare so far, because I mean, it's established that it's very established, and they have a very. Can I wax poetic for a second? No.
Sure.
Yeah, totally. We have time.
As long as you do it like a beat poet.
Beat poet. It's very cool. No. Very established, so that when you're coming up with these large stories and you're trying to land these giant stories, that they have a good feel for how to bring that in. And a lot of that involves some of the similar things we talked about, where we have meetings and we discuss it over. But there's definitely an understanding of the undertaking it is to bring in a large story that you wouldn't get from working on a game that's going to last an hour to 10 hours. That's the one thing I kind of brought into this company with that.
Do you feel, so I mean, you obviously can't touch everything that you used to touch before, but do you feel like you benefited from having had that of understanding that and how it works, and like, because I think you have talked a little bit about understanding how other teams work in a way that preemptively affects your writing, or like, I know, or like things that I think we had this a little conversation earlier, and you were like, handoffs are somehow tricky.
Handoffs of content?
Of objects, between characters.
Well, especially when we're working with the Cinematics people, it's sometimes a difficulty of communication. Cinematics art is the same way. Like when we start describing characters, the artists are in charge of how a character looks. So the writers can have sort of an intent, but really it's the artists that are up to it. And we kind of want to work together, but a lot of times the breakdown comes with the communication. It's like, I remember when we started the concept for Anders in DA2. And to a writer, a character description involves who they are, what their background is. And the artist is reading this saying, oh my God, are there any visual words in here at all? and when we did the description for Anders, like the one visual word we had that Jennifer had written in there was haggard. And we got back this guy that looked like he'd been in prison for like 30 years, kind of bags under his eyes, withered, and we're like, oh my God, what was that? He said haggard. But the rest, he's like, I didn't read that. But for cinematics, it's a similar kind of thing in that their language is very different, and we don't often know what's difficult for them. It's easy to write, not as easy to, like handoffs. You'll notice if you play the game, very often when someone gives the player something, it's done
Don't show it.
Out of frame.
out of frame. Because like we're like, okay, the guy hanging off the cliff, really complicated. They're going to have trouble with this, and then we'll just sort of casually throw off. And okay, and he gives him a gift, and the cinematic designer's like, what?
No.
Interaction between characters.
That's insane because you're going like, oh wait, I have to get this object delivered from this transform on this bone over to that bone in the same scene, and it's got to look good. Oh my God. I mean, unless you get some special hand touch animation for it, which we may get from Cineanum, that it's cost. It
And
comes down to
the
cost.
player is up to 8 different sizes, heights.
Uh,
I think if Cinematics hated anything about the world's creation, it's
Dwarves
that the races, dwarves to Canary.
dwarf sitting and Canary sitting.
He's like, I bet you they would be like, why can't you make all the races the exact same height? That would have been great.
So right, so thank you. It was so exciting when different races came back. Thank you. We appreciate the sacrifice involved. Getting to play
From
dwarves.
them, from the Cinematics
Yeah.
people,
Thank
pretty much
you,
only.
cinematics. Yes.
And then there's other times when you have other departments working together. So Cinematics is working with level design on a lot of the times in the DLC we're trying to go for more, not necessarily emerging gameplay, but it was definitely in game. When you go to the Hour Village or in Jaws of Hakon or when they have the Fortress Assault or anything else, we wanted to go, well, what happens if we don't take the control of the camera away from the player? Okay, well, this comes down to staging, and we're thinking about it like a play, and like, well, I can't do my 180 line, so let's kind of sort of set that up so if the player comes in, I can draw their eye to here, and then we go to work with level design. They don't care about that. They care, is this fun? Can I run through here? Will this boss fight be fun? Will the size of this area actually be okay to allow the combat AI to function properly? So I go like, no, I want a tunnel so we can focus down the vision and like really draw our eye down to this and put lights down. Like, no. Our combat AI needs this. It needs to be this flat area. Like we did
It's all set. Those spaces are set, basically.
Yes,
They're pretty
correct.
hard. Yeah.
The intro for the Elven Dungeon and Trespasser had the same thing, where we wanted like, oh, you come around this bend and you see Kunari fighting the Elven sentries that are there, and it's all about, for the cinematics, it's all about pacing and driving focus, while even allowing the player to still have control of the camera, whereas level design is going to be focused more on gameplay. And sometimes,
And the writers, you're like, oh, the player can be in control of the camera, and I'm like, no, control the camera, make them watch the important thing that is happening. That's the different sort of.
Yes.
No, because as soon as you take control of the camera away, like you want to do it to allow the player to have the freedom, but the camera,
freedom.
the camera is a tool. No, exactly. No, the camera as a tool is extremely powerful. Like if you want to drive an up shot or a wide shot or go really tight on something to drive a feeling, you completely lose that, and you have to do it by like staging pretty much, and it's like you're watching.
I'm joking, of course, but I'm just illustrating.
Are you? Are you?
I'm just the needs of every department and the language we use is a little bit different. It's like it is a thing when they talk about letting the player keep control from a gameplay perspective. That's pretty powerful, and we can recognize that. But it's always a push and pull because let the player have control over their camera runs the risk of them not seeing something that the writers consider important. So we'll negotiate based on how important is it? Because a lot of time the writers will be like, no, that's really important. They're like, is it really important? All right, I guess.
Just a shiny object. Walking back just a little bit to I love that Anders story. Curious how characters, how some of our our favorite characters, all of them are all our favorite characters, have evolved through collaborating with artists and other folks on the team. I know you talked a little bit about Vivian changing kind of drastically.
Yeah. Well,
Or
I
with
mean,
actors too, as you work with actors.
yeah. I mean, the character creation process has become pretty lengthy because they're the follower characters, for instance, are Touchstone. Everybody knows it, so everybody has sort of a vested interest in taking part in that, right? It's not just the writers, and like we'll have characters. I remember Vivienne specifically was interesting just because when we start, it's a blurb. A blurb is just like a small paragraph, and we're going for evoking a feel as opposed to giant page of text that we know the artist won't read anyway. And we say we want to feel. So for I remember for Vivienne, it was Ice Queen, and the first concepts we got back, she was a white woman, very pale, sort of imperious and stuff. But it seemed a little boring, and we couldn't quite put our fingers on what was wrong. And I remember Matt Rhodes, who was the lead concept artist, said, "Well, let me try something," and he came back. And he actually had inversed it. She had the Vivienne you're familiar with, the very dark skin, and he lightened up her outfit to be white and gold at the time. And it was so striking. And it was incredible how even that change, and I remember Mary Kirby, the writer, just saw it and immediately went, "I want that character." And that's how it works. What we're going for is something that will inspire a writer or a cinematic designer, and they have this idea like, even right from that picture, who was Vivienne's cinematic designer? Just trying to think.
That was Vanessa.
Vanessa had immediate ideas over how Vivienne would present herself, how she would walk, and once we've got to that point, it's like, okay, we're good. And then that's sort of how we get to that point. But it even goes down to small things. The artist putting elements like the Solus with it, the wolf jaw. That came completely from the artist when they put that on. It's like, oh, that's brilliant that you guys added that.
Yeah, because Matt Rhodes is actually a really big fan of that. I remember coming out of like Mad Max always talking about in the character design to leave something on the character. It's almost like a Chekhov's prop on the character. It's like, this will come back later.
That jaw has to go
Or
off in the third act. Yeah.
I mean, just to do the blood transfusion at the end of the movie. That's what he's talking about. That, and then I'm like, oh, that's what you were trying to drive with Solus and everything else. And you'll see that with other characters.
Is that like a writing principle, or how you feel about stereotypes in house, where you're like, well, they're just boring, so let's just flip it, or let's change it, or twist it? I mean, because that's one of my favorite things about the characters throughout the universe is that they're like, well, we could do this, but let's give the elf a massive sword or something. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Or a giant hat.
Or a giant hat.
Yeah.
I love Cole to death, but giant hat. I love it.
That hat. Don't talk to me about that hat. I'm not going to throw them under the bus, okay?
We do not speak of the hat.
We had to animate around it.
Because you could have a philosophy where you're like, I hate it, and I'm politically and morally motivated to flip this stereotype, or it's like, I'm just so bored, I've seen it everywhere. Is that
Stereotypes are something you can't always avoid, and it's not necessary to avoid them always. It's part of a conversation, right? Like, I think the thing you want to avoid is falling into a stereotype without meaning to, without knowing that you did, and so you just did it out of because it's rote, because it's. I mean, and I'm not saying that Dragon Age always succeeded at that, right? But it's a conversation, and to look at it, because, for instance, some people say that Dorian is a stereotype. And that came up while we were working on it, and this was the part where after we figured out that he was gay, and I thought, oh, I like that, and I took that character as my own, and I was really excited to write it, and I did my first draft, and he immediately had a voice, which is unusual, because usually, like, Cassandra took forever, but Dorian's voice came to me immediately, and I put him out there, and everybody loved it, but then the question came up, it's like, well, is he a stereotype? And I was like, I don't know. I have some gay friends who I would say fall to the more flamboyant. And when this came up, I had that moment of, oh, well, maybe but wait. Those friends of mine, they're good friends. I love them dearly. I refuse to suggest that they are not straight acting enough for public consumption. And so I was like, no. So sometimes it's like, you talk about it, stereotypes can be useful as well as a kind of shorthand. You just don't want to rely on them always, right? So you're going to have some, but then there are other times too where you do want to flip the stereotype on its head and have the character the opposite, have the elf with the giant sword, have the arguably more masculine woman that is a hopelessly feminine romantic.
Much as I wish she were interested in ladies. But sometimes. But
You're not alone.
I know. But I respect that decision a great deal. But right, maybe sometimes subverting the stereotype is just allowing Dorian to be a full human being, which he really is, which I love.
Well, I think the part of that was looking at the presentation of what you have. Like if you have a female character, I think the thing is that what is the larger context of your game? What is the breadth of portrayals? Like, because we had that conversation on Dragon Age 2, Isabella, a sexualized character. In the larger context of the industry, not very great. But we were talking about it in the context of Dragon Age 2, and there was a question that came up is like, well, her sexuality is empowering for her, and that's great. But what is the context within our game? And we're like, but we have Aveline, who I just love so much. We have Meredith. We had some range in our female characters, so we felt okay with having Isabella as being a possibility. If Isabella had been by herself, say she was the only female character, I would have been like, no, that would lean me more towards that's not okay in the context of the industry or in the context of this game.
I was going to say that's probably the one thing that I wish, or that's happening now in the conversation where your game doesn't exist in a vacuum and your game itself isn't a vacuum, and so that's lovely to hear that kind of consideration.
Well, I mean, I'd love to have everything, to have the context of the industry being more important, but I mean, we can't create something that is responsible for the whole industry. It's like, but we can have that. Not be ignorant about it either, make a conscious decision as opposed to an accidental decision.
Conscious decisions. I feel like that's a great place to leave it and to open for questions. Does that feel good to you guys?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay, cool, because we're about half an hour. So.
Are there questions? Are we going to get silence?
Does anyone have any questions about a BioWare game, really? I called on you, Bandana. Hello, Bandana. Have a say.
Well, big surprise. Continuation of yesterday. I'll go ahead and just get this over with. For the whole panel, let's limit this to Inquisition, and I won't prime the pot any. Who's your one true pairing?
Huh. See, but my OTP isn't an Inquisition. It's Merrick and Logain from the first novel I wrote. But if I had to go to Inquisition, it's got to be Iron Bull and Dorian. Adorable, right?
Yes.
You know what the sad thing was? Like, okay, I totally love Dorian. Totally.
Did you?
And Iron Bull. I did, actually. I did, very much. But for, like, the cutesy one that I couldn't romance, but I was just kind of like, oh, my God, was Cole the whole time.
Oh, baby. But he's such a wee baby.
It was just like the little, like...
Get your mitts off, Cole. Get your dirty, dirty mitts off.
That little innocence. How dare you?
Oh, my God. I said...
I'm fine with the idea of Cole having a sex life, just nowhere,
no.
nowhere in my
No.
knowledge or vicinity, please.
But see, the thing is, if you added a sex life into what Cole is, that would completely change what makes him so
there-
adorable in the first place.
Yeah.
There's a point that where Patrick took him to. Cole was a character I had to hand off, and that was difficult. Patrick, though, was clearly invested, and he had ideas, and I'm like, okay, go. And he made it, Cole in Inquisition is a beautiful thing. The thing I like is that towards the end, you can actually make Cole human, and he starts to develop his sexuality, I guess. And I thought that was a great direction for him to go.
Yeah, I believe, because I think I had two playthroughs, 200 hours per playthrough, and I only played Trespasser with one of them so far, and that one she let him be a spirit still, and so I think there's something with the Bard, right? I think that he set up Krem and the Bard, and I was like, that's the coolest, and then someone else was like, no, they got together, and I was like, oh, cool, that's all cool, both are cool.
Yeah, that's one of the ones I got to work on towards the end. It was like he wanted to give her a nice moment with the bird coming in and the crumbs. So either the Bard would go with him, or if it was left as a spirit, it'd be he was trying to do something nice for the bar that you
Yeah.
can end up with Zither or
And for
somebody
Krem.
else.
Go Krem.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's awesome
Go
for Krem.
get it.
Forget Zither. That's the one. Stand.
My not that it matters, but my OTP was I didn't play it because it was too heartbreaking. This is a player tension I have all the time, where the drama isn't people dying and the player is like everyone must live. That was my Mass Effect 2 conundrum. But so looking up how to save Warden, I was like, what the hell? Why are you dying? But was that Solus I think is my maybe most interesting pair, because you're like, oh my god, you're so close to the dude who matters the most in this whole universe. Like, that's so cool. And so sad.
That was the plan from the beginning, though. Solus
Really?
was the first character that I made for Inquisition, and his through line was the basis from which the entire rest of the plot came, because he was actually planned for from the very beginning. I just thought that'd be so neat if we set up possible. I don't know where the game is going, or the story is going now. I'm not in charge. But set up the possible antagonist of the future as somebody you know. That's cool.
And
Maybe
he's so that.
maybe had sexy dreams with.
Oh
yeah.
my god! And he saw that boy. He saw the boyfriend that would go and disappear forever, and then just show up and was like, I think you have some questions. It's like,
Right, yeah, you're like,
fucking right.
yes, I do. Why did you break my heart, first of all? Secondly, why did you destroy the universe? But then I ended up going with Cullen. Cullen is my personal, because I had unfinished business from 1. I had such massive, and all the little nods to that with, I think, there's this little video of him asking Liliana about the Warden, right? It's the cutest thing I've ever seen. Yeah, so Cullen was my big private. And I just love
Our
him.
nightmare situation was having a conversation between Cullen, Liliana, and Morrigan. The variable hell from the previous games. It's like, okay, if we were ever going to do that, they would have one conversation. It'd be like 5,000 words, and then they would all end with, "And we will never talk about this again."
Oh my God. All right, I love it. Next question. Yes.
This is a totally silly question for you, Dan. Is there a reason that Krem cannot stay in that chair?
That's an excellent question.
That's a great question.
Going back to performance, we saw his character concept come, and we're like, he cannot sit in chairs. No,
Lies!
I just don't feel that he could. No, it just ambient behavior systems on a new engine. Just a lot of fun technical things that came across until the end, and then I could wax poetic about technical things, and that wouldn't sound like it came to a lot of technical things. But yeah, I guess I could say performance. It was that. Yes. No, it's I mean, you're pretty much coming to like it's collision issues and other things that are going on for ambient performance systems, because they ended up trucking out a whole new version of a light character to like a month or 2 before we were going to launch from the game, and they're just like, so we have our full characters and our creatures that have AI combat and can do all these things. Then we have our NPC characters, which are pretty much, they have everything. They have a mesh, a render, they have AI, they have pathfinding. They just have combat pulled out.
Sorry, go ahead.
Those are good. And then we can only, yes, shut up.
No, I was going to say, we could probably have a whole panel on just like transitioning to the Frostbite engine, probably, right? Like, I mean.
We could talk for days. But, at the very bottom of the chain, we were like, well, we need more than 8 characters, because NPCs can only support 12 characters spawned in at once, and 4 of those were your party and you. So 8 characters total. So we need Halam Sharal. We need to fill that out. So that way, we actually created the light characters, which essentially it's a prop. It's a renderer and an animatable, and that way, that's when you run into that's why we want to do more with. Wow, if I bump into this character, I want them to respond to me later on. But that was a response that.
That was a way more detailed answer than it was.
I didn't want to be glib.
No, let's get super technical. That sounds really cool.
So sorry. There we go.
We have probably time for 2 more questions, I think, if they're quick. Yes.
I have a pretty quick one. So this is mainly for David. So I think one of the most, even now, having played through the entire game, one of the most striking moments about DAI was the title scene. The screen where it's just like, okay, you want to start a new game? Explosion! The whole thing, it just goes crazy.
That wasn't from writing, actually. I think that was the cinematics team. That was cinematic animation.
wanted it punchy.
It is really cool.
Yeah,
It's really cool.
they came up, they brought the idea forward because they didn't want just a plain old title screen. They wanted to, they came up and they showed a beat board that would, and then as you press start, you were actually causing the explosion. And then when they presented that, I'm like, that is pretty fucking cool. Okay, let's.
I've never had a title screen actually do something like that to
Yeah.
me before, so I was just going, who is responsible for that? That was brilliant.
Yeah, the best moment I had, just out of the blue, I'm going to answer my own question because it just occurred to me. The best moment I had when something came back was the Dorian scene with his father. Once it came through, I sat through the voice actor recording.
I love him so
which
much.
made me collapse in tears. And then once it went through Mike, who did
Mike
the
Hustle.
scene, and Mike added so many small touches to that scene. And then when I finally saw the final product, I think for me that was in my career. That was the moment, me sitting there in my chair. I can't even talk about it. All right, let's move on.
I'm
A little
actually
verklempt.
crying. I'm crying right now. Yeah. I can't. I did this makeup 2 seconds ago. I can't ruin it already. Okay.
I just thought about that. I'm like, you know what? This is the con to bring that up because when I was at GX2, it was right before Inquisition came out, and we hadn't even announced Dorian yet, and I couldn't talk about anything. And it's like, but I really wanted to. Yeah, it was a good
Wonderful.
moment.
Beautiful.
It was great to work in the same room when Mike was, who was the owner for Dorian and Cinematics, and every time he was going over the romance scene, you just pass by his computer and see like
Dorian's
Dorian
ass.
butt. Yeah.
But more Dorian, but
Which
sometimes-
I demanded is like after the sex scene, I just want him standing there kind of proudly criticizing your decorations, and you can just stare at his ass.
Some days it's a full day of cat videos. Other days it's just Dorian's butt. So maybe one more. We have time for one more. One more. Yes, in the back there.
So I do remember you saying last year that you promised a gay character before it was announced. But I did want to ask, and so David, you already
Easy promise because I'd already written him.
I know. So you've already kind of touched on this, but I'm curious for the whole panel. What is the single most powerful scene in the game after you played it and saw the completed product?
Well, for one was Dorian scene with his father, which was difficult and personal, and I felt it was my chance. I mean, I like writing bisexual characters, but the chance to write a gay character was something I felt like. I mean, not that it's required. I mean, I write in lots of straight characters too. So you reach down into a part of yourself, but that was one that I could tap into something that was very close to home. Although a lot of people assume that Dorian's experience is my experience, like I was just putting my life there. That's not true. But I have feels. And I think when a writer has a chance to put something personal in their character, it's a chance for something a little extra, and I thought that was there. But outside of that scene, I think it was the song. The song at the camp, which was had required a collection of a lot of different people and even audio. I got the chance to write the song. They asked me to, and so. It was. I had this idea. I was the one driving the vision from the beginning, and when we finally got that back, when the audio came back, and the composer had chosen to do it with a chorus, and then they got the VO got in and got the actual actors for Leliana and Cullen to actually sing as well, and they looped them into the chorus. So as the camera, and then working with cinematics so that you only heard that particular character when the camera was on that character, and you'd hear Leliana's voice singing or whatever, right? And
Sound design did a really good job.
when they finally came together and we got the final ones, just having the you did something right when you watch the scene and you're just getting those goosebumps traveling up and down your arms. You're like, yeah, okay, cool, we did it.
I think it's a mix for two for me. Is that cheating? I don't know. Good. Yes. Set the precedence. Awesome. First off, for Cole, because like I said, it always comes back. I loved his character, and taking him to go after the person who he had seen kill himself, and the yes to no to hit. Watching him pull the weapon and then not do it. It was a very impactful moment, and I didn't get to really work on it, so I didn't really get to feel it until I was there watching it. And then the other one was Iron Bull, and that was on John Epler, so I only got to see some of it in reviews.
Which scene?
For Iron Bull, for his loyalty mission when you're going out and you're trying to figure out you want to.
Did anybody not save them?
What?
Did anybody not save? Yeah.
And she paid for it at Trespasser. Wow.
Fuck.
Cold.
Yeah, but and totally saved them. I couldn't not save them, but watching Iron Bull's reaction and the weight it was to wow, I just kind of got you ousted from your whole entire culture. I'm really sorry, but you're still cute. Very impactful, I think, for me.
I think we're out of time, and it doesn't matter what I think, but yeah. Is that all we have time for? Someone with a Sprite thing. Another question? Okay, cool. Mine was also Cullen and addiction, by the way. Because when you know someone, it can be very difficult to know how to help them and what kind of boundaries to set and what kind of support to offer. So that was and his performance, his little cracking voice and his internal, because he's beating himself up. So anyway, that's it. That's my answer. One more? Nobody.
Or we're done.
All the questions have been answered. All right, we're good. Thank
Forever.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, GamerX. Thank you so much.